Good afternoon. Are we still sleepy from lunch? Good afternoon. There we go. We are here. Welcome to the Precision Livestock segment of the Farmer Panel. My name is Dr. Brian Dorcey. I'm one of the consulting veterinarians for the Southwest Vet Services. Practice in the southwest corner of Minnesota. Do primarily beef work. And so today we've assembled a panel of producers that we work with that are FBN members that also have employed precision livestock on their farm. And one of the things that I, as a consultant, am constantly trying to keep updated and abreast of is the changing technology and software packages that are out there as part of our precision livestock. And I think in my travels, we are at a very early part of the trajectory of what precision livestock has to offer us as managers and owners, as well as our customers in consumer confidence. And so we've got some leaders in the industry up here for you that have different technologies that they've chosen to employ on their farm, as well as different industries that they work in. So for that, we're just going to start off by having them all introduce themselves and what their farm is about and what precision livestock system they're using. So the first is Lance Bullerman from Adrian, Minnesota. The next is, well, that didn't work out so good. Taylor is from North Dakota, Dan is from Iowa, and Michael is also from Iowa. So I'll let Lance take it away.
So in our operation, we get dairy beef calves from a dairy at day one, and we take them all the way to finish. We currently use Dairy Comp as the health side of things, and then Feed Supervisor as a feed system. And then we use Weightronics and to weigh all the calves that work with the,
What stages do you weigh your calves?
So our calves are weighed at day one when they come in, right at birth, and then when I wean them, at day 60 they get weighed again, and then every time we work them, so at 250 pounds they get weighed roughly, and then 70 days after that we weigh them, and then 120 days after that, at every implant they get weighed, and then they get weighed for a final weight when they go on the truck to the packer. So
we run a cow-calf operation, and then we back run all of our own calves through yearlings, as well as running custom feeding for other producers during backgrounding. The performance beef is what we use to track every calf, every pound of grain coming in, every cost, bedding, shots, innocent death loss, everything. So everything gets tracked, every pound of feed in, every dollar in, every dollar out, all through that program. It's really made my life a lot easier.
My name is Venteicher. We dairy farm in northeast Iowa. We're milking 200 head of Holsteins. We kind of started implementing a lot more automation back in January of 2020 is when we first fired I guess you call it the first roundup. Technically it was late December, but we feed the milking herd with Lely Vector. It's an automated feeding system. The cows are all milked with 3 Lely A5 milking robots. And then November of last year, we started feeding our calves, the young stock, with Lely Calm. It's a group feeder. So the automation now almost goes full circle, except for where the heifers are raised. It's on a different site. We still own and raise them ourselves, but it's far enough away we can't fully implement the automation across both of those sites. But the Vector keeps track of how much feed we use every day, kind of similar to what these guys are talking about, but it's doing it all automated on its own. We just have to keep what we call the kitchen, where the ingredients are. Just keep that filled up, and then the robots kind of do what they sound like they do. They milk the cows 24/7, and we'll get all that later possibly. So.
Thank you.
Mike Doran. I've got a purebred Angus beef business called Butz Angus that I'm a co-owner of, and at that business we take purebred Angus beef from conception all the way to the retail side. We've got an integrated business year-round calving where we put in about 150 embryos a week, every week year-round, to have a consistent year-round supply of purebred Angus beef. And because we own the seed stock with that, we utilize GrowSafe to do feed intake and real-time individual animal intake and gain data to go back into our genetic selection so that we can select animals that have the meat quality we need for our customers while continuously trying to improve the feed efficiency of those animals based on how we want to manage them. And I also have a swine business where we take purebred Duroc pork and Duroc sire pork from farrowing all the way through the export side. We've got customers that purchase that in Japan, and you can find it on grocery store shelves in Tokyo. And on that side of the business, we implement, from a finishing management standpoint, tools like Every Pig, which is a mobile app that allows real-time communication between our growers, veterinarians, and management, as well as Distinct, which is a real-time data collection in the hog barn that allows water, feed consumption, manure pit levels, as well as some other environmental information, utility usage to be tracked real-time and collected without a person having to worry about writing it down, so we can help track the carbon footprint and sustainability, as well as help know where we need to focus our resources on where the problem sites are.
Awesome. So some really unique and diverse systems up here to choose from. Where did you come from? And we'll start this way. Go back, Dan, if you come back this way. What did you have before you started down the path of choosing a precision livestock system? And what did you have before, and what made you choose where you are today?
So I started as an animal health rep for Elanco Animal Health right out of college, and that allowed me exposure to a lot of other vendors in the industry and a lot of innovations that companies like Elanco and Zoetis have been analyzing, startup companies. And so really, prior to being a producer myself, I was able to understand some of the more, leading edge of precision tools out there. And so as I started owning more livestock myself, I've just actively sought those tools and maintained relationships with a lot of the innovators that are bringing these tools.
So the dairy industry has a pretty long history of doing seems like a major change every 10 or 15 years, and we haven't been exempt from that either. I mean, we go back to the 70s, if you had a pipeline, a gutter cleaner, and a silo, you had the world by the tail. And that was something our farm started with in the 70s. In the 2000s, kind of more into my younger childhood, so that's kind of what I just transitioned out of, we had a double-8 parlor and a freestall barn. The barn was built in 96, and the parlor was built into a stanchion barn in 2001, I believe. We used that for the next basically almost 20 years, was the parlor and the freestall barn. So in 2019, we started the process of adding on to the existing freestall barn, put the automation in there, and then we eventually turned off the parlor. So parlors are still very common throughout the country today, but that's where we were versus where we're at now.
Mine was really complicated. It was pen and paper, and we probably did something that not a lot of people did. On the side of our tractor, we had a dry erase board, and every pin got the exact pounds from the day before, so if anybody else got in the tractor the next day, we knew exactly what pen was fed. It was taking me, with the custom feeding, about 4 hours every 2 weeks to run and rerun numbers, and that was something I dreaded doing every day, trying to recheck all them numbers and make sure I'm not screwing my customer or myself, just trying to do the best job I could, and it just made my life a lot easier when we went to this.
We were a lot like tailors, pen and paper, until I graduated, and then I was the push to get more precision and keep track of data and stuff like that, and a feed system, so we knew exactly how much feed everything was getting fed and how much of everything. But yeah, back up till that point, we were just pen and paper, so.
As you work with your feed professionals and veterinary professionals that can work with your farms, how has your precision livestock either allowed you to up your game or attain better information for the people that give input onto your farm? How do you use your consultants better or differently now that you have the things that you track, whether it be somatic cell count, Dan, or feed efficiency, or those kind of things? So.
Just by tracking all my animal, the sickness, and then the weight gains as much as we weigh our calves, by using the nutritionist and going through that stuff with them, getting daily gains, and having the weights on the calves every 2 to 3 months, we can kind of see what type of nutrition we're using, if that's the correct way to be. using it, I guess, or what we're feeding them. And then as the vet side of things, it's just nice to sit down and we can go through on with dairy comp, and we'll track efficiencies of drugs and stuff. So when we're pulling the drugs, which drugs working or being more efficient. So we can make sure we're picking the right drug for the right diseases, and it helps the vet and us on the farm to make sure we're picking the right one and then doing it at the right time. We set all the protocols in it, so the calves automatically pop up if they need to be retreated, so you can look at them so you're not over-treating the calves and the dosage and stuff like that. So it's not a, where did I write that number down last week? It's just all in your phone, and you just app in your phone, and it comes up on your phone, and it'll give you alerts, and this calf's in that pen, and it's been X amount of days since you treated it last, it's up for a retreat or a check, and then you can look at it, and if you want to retreat it or not, and just record it into the pen, and makes it a lot simpler than, you know, so.
Yeah, very similar. By tracking every shot, we know what antibiotic to come with behind it. Just like you said, before you give it a shot, now it's 10 days later, what did I give him? You know, now you know exactly what shot. Managing bunks, something I always wanted to get really good at, and I think that I'm okay at it right now. We do everything with dry matter. It's something when you're doing pen and paper, you're not looking at the dry matter when you're upping cattle or cutting cattle. We also did a few times now, we've done limit feeding, higher cattle rations, and when you're doing that with this precision, you can really dial cattle into an exact gain. You might be looking for a really low 1.5, 1.8 pound gain, which is really hard to do with a high cal ration, but when you dial it in and you time it right and everything's done, we have had cattle that are way underfed for what their body is, and they'll go lay down and they're full. They're just used to it. They got used to being limit fed, and then we can slow grow them and hit a market that's more advantageous to us, I guess.
Obviously, the bread and butter in the dairy industry is selling milk, and before we had any of the automation we have, if we wanted to monitor individual milk production, we would do a monthly test, a DHIA test. And so before, if we wanted to see somatic cell, butter, fat, and protein of each cow, we would have one snapshot from one day, once a month. So it got really difficult making proper or accurate management decisions doing that. The robots every day give us a milk weight from every milking, and then that averages out to a daily production. And we get butter, fat, protein, so we can see if a cow has an inverted milk, fat to protein ratio, might tell us something's off with their diet in their fresh cow transitioning program. Last week we had a funny spot in the corn silage bag, and we have collars on the cows that monitors rumination. So we could see we had 2 or 3 cows, their rumination dropped, and we caught that right away. We treated them appropriately, and they recovered. Versus before, we might not have noticed anything unless somebody visually saw the cow in the parlor with a smaller udder signifying she's down on milk, versus we could catch it 6-7 hours later. So stuff like that's great to work with the vet, and honestly it helps the vet learn too. If we see certain symptoms over and over and the technology confirms that, we can remember, it helps them for other farms too, that this worked well for here because we saw this happen because of this, and the data proves that. So, and then in the calves, with the automatic calf feeder, that there we can track calves and how much they consume each day. So obviously with the individual pens, you can see how much a calf did or did not drink out of a bottle. But we can get a report out of that out of our calf feeder, which is connected to our computer. And then with our automated feeding system, the Vector, we do get daily reports of dry matter intake. So that's really great for our nutritionist. He can hop on whenever he wants, sees what the DMI is of the heifer pen, the mature cow pen. We can monitor. We can't do the forage dry matter intakes of individual cows because it's they're eating at a fence line, but we can check how much each cow is eating at the robot in forms of gluten pellets, so we can see if they're off feed. And those decisions really are pretty critical for our nutritionists, just trying to determine which direction we want to go with any major feeding decisions or forage decisions.
I think how precision technology has helped us better interact with our consultants is it allows us to focus on the problem areas sooner, identify where do we, if we have a health issue, whether it's on the cattle or the hog side, identifying that as early as possible, and then being able to tie in, like you guys talked about, the individual treatments, as well as we're able to capture any diagnostic work being done at like the Iowa State University Diagnostics Lab, tie that back to a group of pigs or to a group of cattle, where we're continually able to keep our veterinarian and nutritionist focused on that process improvement, where we know, okay, there's a lot of noise in this, but if we have real data on how these animals are growing and developing, and real data on what are the exact bugs we're fighting in these different populations, we can have a lot more targeted approach, and we can come in and have these little contemporary groups where we can make an intervention, and then we can actually measure, is it doing something or not, versus, I feel like I grew up with a lot of, we got a problem, let's throw 10 things at it, and hopefully it solves it, and then hopefully it goes away and we don't have to worry about it again, versus, trying to figure out what was the real problem and what was the real solution.
Do you find that the precision livestock systems that you're each using, is it making the top end of your animals that you manage better, or is it making it, or do you find a return by eliminating the ones, the poor doers, earlier in the process? If you follow that, am I getting more from the top end, or am I getting more by eliminating the bottom end in your case, in each of your cases?
I'll start with that one. Our philosophy is we want to reduce variation. So my first observation in the meat business is the best way to create a good customer experience is to provide consistency. It doesn't have to be the best thing in the world, but if a customer knows I'm going to go and buy a ribeye or a pork chop out of the animals I'm raising, I want them to know every time what's that experience going to be like, good, bad, and different. I want them to have a consistent experience, and so reducing variation, we want that population to be as homogeneous and every carcass to look as similar as possible when it gets to the end of the road. And so that's what we're constantly, it's not necessarily improving the top or the bottom, it's trying to consistently get as narrow and tight of a group as possible so that we know what we're delivering, animal after animal after animal, is what we say we're going to bring.
Yeah, the short answer to that question is yes. I mean, I see both of those. This is a very dairy-specific answer, but like the milking robots, being that we give them a pellet at the robot, and that pellet is an energy source. It's not their main energy source, but there's energy involved in that. Those cows that before were milking twice a day in a parlor, they might have hit a ceiling on their production. I mean, we had cows twice a day doing 140 pounds at their peak of production, but that was a very strong ceiling doing twice a day. Cows you going to 3 times a day, you're going to increase that a little more, but where the robots and the feeding technology really shine is those cows that give a little more milk, they're going to get more pellets in that robot. It's just, my grandpa would have done the same thing in the stanchion barn in the 70s. If cow 213 here is giving more milk, well, she's going to get a little extra grain. So I mean, you can almost micromanage them to an extent then that way. So the technology and the data allows us to shave off that bottom end, because there might be criteria we're looking at now we never looked at before. We can see much more specific butter, fat, and protein ratios all throughout their lactation, and we can call for butter, fat, and protein versus before it might have been more difficult to do. One thing we do call for now that we never did before really was milk speed. So we got to consider, I want to get 65 to 70 cows per robot, and if I can get one cow that gives 100 pounds in 5 minutes versus one cow that gives 100 pounds in 15 minutes, well, I can get 3 times the amount of milk out of a herd with one cow versus the other. And then the calves, I think this kind of lends itself to the automatic calf feeder, lends itself to really treating the calf more like they would nurse naturally, like a lot of cow-calf operations do. The dairy industry, it was pretty standard for calves to get feedings twice a day, versus what we like about the automatic group feeder is, they're eating 3.5. Like I'm still getting used to going to liters, everything with ladies and liters and kilograms, but they're getting, I think, 3.5 to 4 liters throughout a 24-hour period. So, and that really, to us, seems to help get us bigger calves in a shorter or similar window.
I piggyback on what Mike said there. We're trying to get, I think on the top and the bottom we see benefits, but when it's all said and done, we're trying to get everything to look the same. So by feeding them consistently, by monitoring, micromanaging all that, we really get our cattle to grow together better than I think they did. Instead of a front end going out front and a back end falling down, we get a lot more consistency through the pens, through the whole entire feedlot, how they grow and they hit what we want, what target pounds we want to get on them per day, I guess.
Yeah, kind of the same as these guys. One thing it did help me do by weighing the cattle is I can get those bottom end cattle that just don't gain as good as the other ones, and I don't have to keep feeding those longer. If they're consistently only doing 1.5 pounds a day throughout 2-3 weigh-ins up to 500 pounds, I can get rid of those cattle and just feed the ones that are going to be more profitable, so we don't have to feed those bottom ends, where that technology has helped me find out which ones those are and get rid of those in a timely fashion. So,
what challenges have you guys had, whether it be family or cost or any other of your challenges? I know just some of that is a common theme I find on farms, as one of the members of the operation maybe wants to bring in a new technology, and getting everybody else on board, and whether it be technological or political or family oriented, what challenges have you guys had with technology? I know early in some of these technologies, getting the Bluetooth signal strong enough was a frustrating challenge with some of the feeding software. So what challenges have you faced with the technology as you brought it on?
well, family's always a challenge. So, you know, my father, for instance, I mean, there's no way he can hardly run a phone, let alone do anything technology. So that was a challenge, just to get him, when he was more involved when we started using technology, is to get him on board to do some of this stuff. So that was probably the biggest challenge. I mean, I got two brothers that are on the same boat as I am. You know, just the more data we got, the more stuff we can collect, the better decisions we can make, and just be better at what we do. So.
Yeah, I agree with Lance. The technology part, there probably wasn't as much challenge as human behavior. It's probably the hardest challenge. Just from teaching, you know, my dad, I farm with my dad, teaching him, and you know, human behavior as far as the way you load the way you load the feed wagon is the same every day. You know, and the DMR mixer wagons makes a difference. Precision-wise, it has nothing to do with precision feed, but we got very picky about how we give shots, where we give shots, all that stuff. And when you've done something one way for many, many years, it's hard to get people to change to it. But once they change to it, they'll even catch me and, hey, that's not what we would do. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I've been on you on that one. So, well, you can get it, and it's better when it's all done, I guess.
We've been very fortunate. Our family overall has been very good about adapting the technology. It's something that my dad saw his grandpa be willing to do, and I saw my dad be willing to do, so it was easy for us in that way. I think our challenge would probably, thinking back to when we started the whole project, was getting a bank on board. We had a couple that were ready to jump on with us, but their interest rates just weren't where we liked it, and we'd never done any business with them before. Getting our local loan officer was phenomenal to work with. He was on our team. It was kind of the you know, smarter nuts out in, you know, where the corporate world is. That was hard to get them on board. They just hadn't, especially the Vector. We were the first one in Iowa. They had never seen anything like that before, so they were nervous to jump on with it. It probably took a good 4 or 5 months just really trying to hammer down to get them on board. And now they're glad they did, and we're just kind of like, I told you so. But I mean, we understand their hesitation. It's the first one. I'm a young farmer, but we were very glad to have the local office we did that had such strong support. But it was kind of, again, the corporate nuts that were kind of hard to crack for us.
Yeah, I would echo. Yeah, getting the financial support. You know, you want to work with your local bank, but you know, in Iowa, I mean, we've raised more livestock and crops here than anywhere else in the world. Yet, you know, for banks to step out and stand behind young producers, I mean, it's scary for them. And the livestock side is just viewed as it's volatility, it's corporate. If you're not an integrator, you know, how are you making it? You have 200 cows. These other guys have 12,000. You know, how can you do it? You know, same thing. I got a small amount of pigs relative to Smithfield or somebody. So how can I survive? And you know, yeah, you gotta take a lot of shots on goal and develop. You know, I developed a relationship with about a half dozen different lenders, and I know different opportunities fit this bank versus that bank, and you learn who you can take stuff to and who you might as well save your breath on. The other part, the family challenge for me, my dad's a lawyer, so we get free legal support as long as I pay my taxes. My dad's very supportive of what I do. I built my livestock stuff outside of my family, but I have 2 going on 3-year-old triplets, and one of them has had some medical complications, and I'm the kind of guy that, I mean, when we decided that we were going to do the pork and beef thing, I mean, I jumped in head first and put everything everything in the kitchen sink into it, and balancing time with kids, time at doctor's appointments, all that stuff, along with trying to grow the business. I mean, that's a real struggle, and everybody with a young family faces it to some degree, of trying to have that balance of having time with your family at home, having your family involved on the farm, and getting, I love my son Luke. There's some people out here that know my son Luke real well. He comes to a lot of this stuff with me. He comes out to the farm with me, and it makes a 10-minute job turn into 2 hours. But it's obviously worth it to make that time and make that experience for your kids. But it can be a huge challenge at the same time.
That's a good segue into my next question, because my next question is going to be, what do you think your ROI, your return on investment, on the technologies that you've implemented? Where has it enriched your life, whether it be in money, labor management, or time back with your family? Where have you seen the benefit pay back to you?
Well, this is, I've experienced it firsthand, where having these technologies where you can remotely monitor what's happening, and I can get real-time access to information, feed intake data on a group of pigs, so I can guess or have an educated opinion on, okay, I need to sell 3 loads of hogs out of this barn this week. I mean, there was a period over the last couple of years where I'd spend 2 to 3 weeks at a time in the hospital with my son Luke. So I was running 30,000 head of pigs and a couple thousand head of feeder cattle from Blake Children's Hospital in Des Moines with my computer set up, and having those kind of technologies along with good people that you can trust and that support and love my family like I do. I mean, it makes it possible. But yeah, having that data where I know, okay, I haven't been in that group of pigs, I haven't left the hospital, but I can go look up a report and see, as of last night, these pigs consumed 580 pounds of feed a head. So yeah, we need to be taking a first cut out of here. You can make that decision remotely.
If you're a dairy farm, especially if you're a small dairy farm, you're very tied down to twice-a-day milking. And there's a lot of dairy farmers that get into different competitions about who's gone the longest without missing a milking, and that's not a competition I want to win. And the robots and the automation for us have really given us a lot more flexibility. I likely wouldn't be here in Omaha without the robots and the automation we have. It's allowed, we have 3 kids as well, and it's allowed us to, be more active in their lives. It's something I never saw my dad do much of in my life. We work great together now, and he's often expressed those regrets that he wished he would have done more. And he was kind of the first on board with the robots because he didn't want that to happen to me and my brother as well. So on the business side of things, we've seen our income over feed cost numbers just be twice as good, I shouldn't say twice as good, but significantly better than they were without the automation that we had before. Even though we're not, there's some dairy farms that are, averaging 110 pounds of milk per cow, and even though we're not up to that standard, the blind numbers that our nutritionist gives us with these other 12 farms, we can't see the names of who they are, so we know which ones are, but we can compare it and benchmark it to other ones. Our income over feed cost is in the top 20%, even with the expense of the automation and the gluten pellets and that kind of stuff. So on a lifestyle side, we love the flexibility that it gives us. On the business side, we like that it's made us more profitable. We're able to get better instead of getting forced to get bigger.
Yeah, I always joke with, when I built the feedlot, I said I could as well start got dairy cows because you don't ever get to leave. And when we left, I felt guilty. I was worried about the cattle getting fed at home and getting thrown off. And that was when we were young in a relationship. Once we got this, I check it every morning when I'm down here. I can see when the cattle got fed, what they got fed, everything got fed correctly. ROI as far as the business side, numbers make a difference, but it'll always make you better as a feeder. But I would say for me, the first week of the month, when it's a monthly subscription, I get my ROI back. I get 3 weeks of profit, I would say, every month off of it. So there wasn't a lot of startup costs, and I kind of joke that hopefully they don't ever put the price up because I will pay it. So.
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I mean, just having the information and being better saves time and saves money. Just knowing what's getting fed and when they're getting fed, and being consistent with everything, and having that data helps do that. In return, saves time and money. So.
And the last question before I open it up to the audience that I have for you, as you look into the future, what bells and whistles, or what's the next advancement do you see on the technology that you're using, or what would you like in the package that you're specifically using on your farm that isn't there today that you'd like to see as a producer that would add to what you're doing?
So I've been actually talking to my dairy comp guy about tracking my cattle individually on the feed side of thing along with the health. So in our operation, we move the calves 6 different times from baby calf all the way to the finishing barn, and we size them every time. But they don't track that feed individually per animal on an average of what's in the pen. So if you got the calf in pen 1 for 100 days and you feed it this much feed, it would average out for that. Then you take that calf and move it to a different pen. I wanted to track that calf, so every day, an average of what that pen would eat would be allocated to that calf, so that when I sell it out as a finishing calf, I could just print out, on average, of what pen that calf was in its whole life, and it'd give me an average feed cost, its whole life per day by the pen average at the pen it was in. So when you pull a sick calf out and put it in a sick pen, of course the sick pen ain't gonna eat near as much feed as a normal pen would. So it automatically just tracked that, oh, and this calf was eating 20 pounds of dry matter, and then put it in the sick pen and only 13 pounds of dry matter on average for a week. So it just tracked what your actual cost was per calf per day by the pen it was in, on the average by the pen it was in. So that's kind of what I would like to, my next step of what I want to get into, so I get individual feed and health data on the calves individually all the way through. So
Yeah, that's pretty much would have been my answer, is tracking the individual calves all the way through from in a cow-calf operation. We are thinking about someday EID tagging everything, following them all the way through. We do have some cattle getting finished right now through our cattle we raised, and I'd be really interested to see what genetics came all the way through, what's going to be the best, I guess.
One piece of technology we're looking at actually involves a bolus. So I mean, we have the collars for rumination and activity, but there's one company I've been talking to and working with, we're hoping to maybe try something next summer, is actually a bolus that every cow will get. And the neat thing about that is they're claiming with like a 95% accuracy, they can tell 16 hours before a cow's gonna calf every time. Like 95% accurate. 16 hours before she calves, they'll know, and then you can start watching. So they can monitor water consumption with that, body temperature, rumination, and activity. So that's something we kind of got our eye on for sometime next year.
We've actually, with one of the large stud companies, looking at maybe the same technology. Yeah, looking at bolus for calves and for cows, a larger one that's got a lot longer shelf life for cows, and then one for calves that tracks a lot of biometrics. The other piece, I think really, you know, the opportunity to do the individual animal traceability on the cattle side is there today. I look for something like that to happen on the pig side as well, because that's, you know, genomically, we test every calf at birth, we take a tissue sample and get a genomic panel back across with 13 different traits, and they get a force score on a 100 percentile, ranked from 1 to 100. And those animals, we can treat them as individualized as we want from that point on, and they get an individual EID at birth that ties back to that genetic score and whatever other data we collect along the way. And I think at some point to have that individual traceability on the swine side that will help from a consumer confidence and marketing standpoint, as well as from a decision-making standpoint of understanding, you know, just the variation within a population, even though, you know, dairy cattle and hogs are a lot more homogeneous than beef cattle, but there's still obviously inherent variation that, you know, animals have different immune responses, different durability, feed efficiency, everything else that today that you have to treat them as a population because you don't really have a choice. But I think that EID technology, as the cost of those tags and tag readers go down, I think that'll be something where then we can have those animals tracked all the way through slaughter and get that individual carcass data.
Awesome. Well, now's the time in the program that we're going to open it up to audience questions, comments, and so there'll be a couple people roaming around with microphones out there to take your questions to make sure we got enough time to get that into these guys. And I think they're good examples of different sectors that embrace technology and are leveraging that to make life better. So raise your hand and somebody will bring you a mic, and got one right here in the front.
and ask your questions so everybody can hear you.
Hey there. Hey you guys, thanks for a great panel. My name is Gil Patterson. I'm a veterinarian and I work for a tech company that is really designed to help strengthen relationships between veterinarians and producers such as yourselves. I was curious if you could tell us a little bit more about your relationships with your veterinarians, sort of how often do you talk to them, how do you talk to them, you know, is it text, email, phone, and then what could you do if you could, again, improve on that relationship using a tech tool? What would that look like? What would make that relationship better or bring more value to you? Thanks.
So in our operation, we actually do monthly walkthroughs. So every month, the vet, my nutritionist, come out and we walk through all the cattle and discuss anything that needs to be discussed and done. Anytime I got any questions, anything, Dorcey's on speed dial, so pretty much a text and do that. I mean, I've gotten pretty good at posting calves over the years where if it's nothing too serious, I'll post it and I'll snap him a picture and say, what do you think? Stuff like that. If he thinks it's something serious, he'll tell me to grab tissue samples or give me his opinion, but for sure I see him once a month and then pretty much available at any time I call him to answer questions or guide me in the right direction, I guess. So, but very open to getting Dorcey's opinion. I don't shy away from not calling him. If I think there's an issue, better safe than sorry.
Yeah, I do very similar. I give my guy a call right now anytime he'll answer the phone. He knows I don't call him just to shoot the crap with him. You know, hey, don't call him, I got a problem. It's right now we got a really good one. My brother's in vet school, so the way I'm gonna address it, I'm gonna have my own personal vet hopefully in about 2 years, so that'll help. As far as going into the technology, my personal vet right now does a great job with not lacing me into one kind of vaccines or one company's vaccines, just shot placement. It really helps us along with all the new medicine coming out all the time. I guess that'd be one way that I appreciate to do it for me, I guess.
Our vet, she's out every Monday. We do her health. So same thing. I'm not going to repeat a lot of it. Well, I'll text if I have any questions. She's okay if I want to videotape something for veterinary practices or for educational purposes for social media. She's very on board with all that. So yeah, I don't have much to add. I don't know if there's any one piece of technology that would really change our relationship and how well we work together. I see her often enough that everything goes pretty smooth.
On the cattle side, you know, we're fortunate enough to be right outside of Ames, so we got Iowa State University and the vet diagnostic lab literally less than 5 minutes from the farm. And so we've got a relationship with a local veterinarian as well as with the Iowa State Field Services crew. And so we have regular meetings where we all get together and sit down at the farm and look at if there's any specific animals we want to look at, but talk through protocols, any diagnostic results, do regular tissue sampling and surveillance. But you know, the precision side, you know, on that, where I mean, it's just as easy. We can have an animal at the college, alive or dead, for evaluation in no time. So we're pretty comfortable on that. But the swine side, you know, there's a lot of opportunity with things like this Every Pig app that's out there, or some other tools where you can create that feedback loop where, you know, if I want to have somebody on a farm or a field man post a pig, yeah, we create a system where, you know, that group ID, anybody can submit pictures, culture results, PCRs, any of that health information, and it basically kind of stays in a group chat tied to that group. And so the veterinarian, my management guys, the grower, and myself all see that interaction all the time. And so the vets, the biggest thing, you know, I mean, everybody gets busy, and you know, if I feel like, you know, we need a quicker response, then, you know, I can text or pick up the phone and call. But the veterinarian stays very looped into that, and it makes it very nice to be able to, for him to be able to cover a lot of ground without having to necessarily be there in person.
I'll answer that. Even though I'm the moderator, I'll chime in there. I get everything from a text message to a FaceTime from the back of a horse, right? And so these phones that we have in our pockets are super powerful. And lots of times it allows us to do very high quality practice at a distance, where I'll get a picture of a dead post-mortem picture, and they'll give me the data on it. I'll circle a part on the picture, I'll say, send me a piece of that. And that cowboy will put that in an overnight shipper. It'll be at the diagnostic lab the next day. PCR is done that afternoon or shortly thereafter. And then the other thing would be some of these stationary feedlot softwares that are, AHI system, MWI system, where I can tunnel in on the backside when we've got abnormalities or anomalies that are outside of our benchmarks. And so the one piece that I think the opportunity that's out there is how do we coalesce and how do we interact with all these data systems that we have as veterinarians and as producers to work to, like you said, get it to one group chat or one central spot that also can act as a medical record for us as veterinarians. So yeah, there's all kinds of systems out there. What else? Raise your hand. Yes, sir. I'll get you one. This ain't gonna look pretty.
Mike, you mentioned that distinct system, and some of the attributes of that were manure pit, etc., some curtains. Does that also have a security system as far as entrance, and be able to calculate when that barn has been monitored? And then also, is that system only limited to swine, or does it migrate into dairy and beef as well?
I think at some point it has applications, I think, in any confined animal situation, dairy, beef, poultry. So this distinct system, and it's a former colleague of mine at Elanco, BJ Brugman, developed this. And they, so it's basically what we call a PC gateway. So they go into hog barns I want and put a computer that's got basically a little server with its own wireless network connection, and we've got a lot of stuff that we've experimented with plugging into it. So, from a traceability standpoint, we looked at door alarms, so being able to door sensors, so tracking, time stamping when a door into a barn's been opened, and even looking at doing RFID tags like on feed trucks and vehicles, to know, okay, if there's, so if I got a system of, I know what feed trucks, semis, and service vehicles come in, to really track animal movements, you can track what vehicles are coming in and out of there at what time, so that if we would have a problem at a site, okay, what are the downstream sites that we may be exposed to that. The thing that we're looking at too is, along with that biosecurity kind of traceability of people and vehicles, is also looking at the, trying to figure out, everybody likes to talk about the carbon footprint or putting a sustainability label on things. And there's been some packers that are talking to producers today about trying to track how much water and propane and electricity and feed are going into a site, and then what kind of output of fertilizer via the manure and protein through the animals is coming back out of that site. That's a nightmare to try and track. I mean, just for a small producer to have to comb through, to go to my growers and say, okay, I want you to send me all your utility bills and your water meter readings and everything. I mean, there's, for very little money, there's a lot of the meters are out there today, and it's a plug and play deal where we could get these meters for 10 or 15 bucks and plug them in and have it uploaded into the cloud where that data can be automatically collected. Nobody has to think about it. And we don't have a sustainability label today. I don't know that we'll get there, but we want to be in a spot where if there's an opportunity to monetize it, I mean, our thought is we want to do the right things every day. I mean, if you're more sustainable, if we're using less resources, we're more profitable, and it's going to make it easier to stay in business. But if there's a reason to share that with somebody else, we want to be able to collect it and objectively measure it and prove that we're doing what we say we're doing. And that distinct system is setting itself up to do just that.
I had one producer, he said, I've become a better environmentalist because I am a really good capitalist. And so if there are things out there to get us paid for the practices that we're already doing, there's always an opportunity to be able to track it, quantify it, and then move it downstream for sure. We've got time for about 2 more questions, so raise your hands high if you got one. Otherwise, I know Dan's got to get to the social media panel. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up. So, burning questions.